The night sky over New York City was never truly dark. Even at midnight, the glow of skyscrapers, the hum of hover traffic, and the faint glimmer of stars painted a restless canvas above. But tonight was different. Tonight, the stars disappeared one by one, replaced by a cold, ominous black void. Captain Elena Monroe of Earth's Coalition Defense Forces stood on the observation deck of the United Nations Aerospace Command Center. She clutched the edge of a polished metal table as the comms officer's voice rang out. "Admiral, we're detecting multiple unidentified objects exiting hyperspace at the Lagrange points," the young officer said, his voice trembling. "They're massive, hundreds of kilometers in diameter. And there are more incoming." A wave of silence swept across the command deck. The term massive failed to capture the scale of what they were witnessing. Real-time holograms displayed colossal alien vessels forming a blockade around Earth. Their sleek designs, with obsidian surfaces and pulsing energy veins, were unlike anything humanity had seen before. Elena's heart pounded. For decades, humanity had prepared for the possibility of first contact. Yet, they had secretly hoped it would come in peace, not like this. Not as an invasion. "Activate planetary defense systems," Admiral Hassan barked, breaking the silence. "Raise the orbital shields and deploy the fleets." "Shields online in 2 minutes," replied a technician. "Fleet commanders are awaiting orders." As Elena watched, the holograms shifted to show Earth's defense fleets mobilizing. Swarms of starships, sleek, angular, and bristling with weaponry, moved to intercept the intruders. But deep down, she knew they were outmatched. Humanity's technology, though advanced, paled compared to the alien ships, which radiated a power that felt almost otherworldly. The air grew heavier with each passing second. Suddenly, the main screen flickered, and a chilling image replaced the tactical display, a humanoid alien with skin the color of liquid mercury and glowing golden eyes. Its voice was a guttural symphony, as though dozens of voices spoke in unison. "I am Commander Terex of the Spark-High Dominion," it began, each word dripping with authority. "Earth is hereby annexed under the Galactic Order. Resistance is futile. Submit, and your species may survive as laborers. Resist, and your world will burn." The alien's message lingered in the air, a death knell delivered with cold precision. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena's fingers clenched into fists. She could feel the collective fear and rage in the room.
"Submit?
Become slaves?
No."
Humanity would not bow so easily. Admiral Hassan stepped forward, his voice a beacon of defiance. "This is Earth. We are not mere chattel to be conquered. You'll find us a fight worth remembering." The hologram of Terex remained expressionless, but tilted its head slightly, almost as if amused. "A brave sentiment. Foolish, but brave. Let your defiance mark the beginning of your end." The transmission ended, and within moments, the alien fleet began to move. Beams of energy as bright as miniature suns shot from their vessels, striking Earth's orbital defenses. The shields held, barely, but cracks began to appear in their shimmering barriers. The Earth's fleet engaged, missiles and plasma bolts lighting up the void like a chaotic fireworks display. Elena watched the battle unfold, every explosion a blow to her resolve. Ships were disintegrating faster than reinforcements could arrive. The aliens' weapons were devastatingly precise, their fleet operating with a terrifying unity. She glanced at Admiral Hassan, who stood unmoving, his expression carved from stone. "Admiral, we can't win like this," she said, forcing the words past the lump in her throat. "Their technology is too advanced. We need a new strategy." He turned to her, his gaze piercing. "What are you suggesting, Captain?" Elena hesitated, the weight of her idea crashing down on her. "We need to fight smarter. Exploit weaknesses they don't know they have. I propose a small strike team, humans with adaptive strategies. Let me lead it." Hassan studied her for a moment before nodding. "You have 1 hour to prepare."
Dismissed.
As Elena left the room, a mixture of fear and determination burned in her chest. She had no idea what the Spark-High were truly capable of, but one thing was certain: Humanity's survival depended on its ability to adapt, to evolve, and to defy the odds. And if the aliens thought Earth would simply roll over, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The command center was a blur of activity as Elena Monroe assembled her team. The corridors echoed with the sound of hurried footsteps and the hum of computers processing the last remaining tactical options. The world had just begun to understand the magnitude of the threat they faced, and there was no time to waste. Elena stood before a holographic display, her face etched with determination. The Sci-Fi fleet was relentless, battering Earth's defenses with a barrage of energy weapons, and it was only a matter of time before their shields failed completely. She couldn't afford to waste precious time. The strategy she had in mind was risky, almost insane, but it was humanity's best shot at survival. Her team consisted of elite soldiers, handpicked from across the globe, each with a unique set of skills that could be exploited in unconventional warfare. There was Sergeant Marcus Valdez, a former Special Forces operator with a penchant for guerrilla tactics. Dr. Li Shui, a brilliant scientist with a deep understanding of alien technologies. And Captain Sarah Hayes, a seasoned pilot with a reputation for thinking outside the box. "You all know the stakes," Elena began, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. "The Sci-Fi are here to conquer, not negotiate. Our planet is not just under attack. It's been marked for annihilation. They'll stop at nothing until we're either their slaves or dust. We don't have the luxury of playing by their rules." Her words hung in the air as the team exchanged grim looks. They had fought in countless battles, but nothing like this. Nothing had ever been so personal. Dr. Li Shui was the first to speak. "You're suggesting we hit them where it hurts, behind enemy lines, deep within their fleet. Do you really think we can do that with what we have?" Elena nodded. "We may not have their firepower, but we have something they don't. Unpredictability. We'll infiltrate their fleet, using stealth technology to get close enough to plant a virus in their systems. If we can disrupt their command network, we might create enough chaos to even the odds." Sergeant Valdez cracked his knuckles, his expression unreadable. "Sounds like a one-way ticket to hell. But hell's better than waiting around to be enslaved."
I'm in.
Sarah Hayes adjusted her flight jacket, her eyes scanning the holographic map. "I've flown through asteroid fields that would make any sane person lose their lunch, but this is different. We'll need an opening, something big to distract them long enough for us to slip through the cracks." Elena turned to the tactical map. "That's where the real challenge comes in. We'll need to create a diversion, something to pull their attention away from us while we slip inside their defenses. If we can cause a little chaos in their ranks, we may just have a chance." The plan was simple, but dangerous. Infiltrate the heart of the Sci-Fi fleet, plant a virus in their main command ship, and escape before the enemy realized what had happened. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If they failed, Earth would fall. If they succeeded, they'd have a shot at crippling the invaders, if they could survive long enough to see the victory. Elsewhere, deep within the Sci-Fi flagship, Commander Terex stood before a massive, floating console. His cold golden eyes flicked over the display, taking in the status of the invasion. Reports flowed in from his subordinates. Earth's defenses were weakening, and their fleets were being torn apart in battle. But there was something strange, something his mind could not easily dismiss. "Commander," a subordinate reported, "we are detecting a small, unknown fleet entering the engagement zone. They appear to be using cloaking technology. Should we engage?" Terex's lips twisted into a faint smile, his voice a low growl.
No.
"Let them come. It will be amusing to see how long they think they can remain hidden." He turned back to the vast expanse of the view screen, where the Earth's defenses flickered in the distance like a dying flame. The humans fought valiantly, but their resistance was nothing compared to the might of the Sci-Fi Dominion. Their species had survived countless conquests across the galaxy, and Earth would be no different. It was only a matter of time before their will broke, and their planet would fall into line as yet another conquered world. But Terex was not without a hint of curiosity. These humans, for all their weakness, seemed to possess an unusual resolve. Perhaps their fight was not yet over. Perhaps, just perhaps, They would provide a challenge worth savoring before their inevitable fall. "Let them try," Terex muttered, his voice tinged with dark amusement. "The hunt has only just begun." Back on Earth, Elena's team prepared for their mission. As they suited up and loaded onto their stealth ships, the reality of the situation began to settle in. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was the first chapter of humanity's struggle against an empire that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. The odds were stacked against them, and failure meant extinction. But as Elena looked at her team, each face etched with the same steely resolve, she knew one thing with certainty: they were going to make the Sparkai regret ever underestimating humanity. The stealth ships sliced through the void like shadows, barely a ripple in the vast expanse of space. Elena Monroe sat in the cockpit of her craft, her hands steady on the controls despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. Around her, the other members of her team were in similar ships, their screens flickering with information as they approached the heart of the Sparkai fleet. "Status check," Elena's voice crackled over the comms.
This is Valdez.
"We're in position, Captain. Just waiting for your go." "Lee here," Dr. Shwe added. "I've activated the virus. It's encrypted and ready to deploy at the right moment." Sarah Hayes' voice, usually calm and confident, had a slight edge to it now. "We're in. But we'll need that diversion soon, or we're toast." Elena's eyes narrowed as she looked at the holographic map of the enemy fleet. The Sparkai command ship, a monolithic structure of black, gleaming metal, was in the heart of their formation, surrounded by dozens of warships. It would be nearly impossible to slip through undetected for long. But their mission wasn't about stealth alone, it was about timing. Timing and the chaos they were about to create. "Initiating the diversion," Elena said, her voice a quiet determination. She sent the signal to the Earth fleet, triggering a prearranged strike. High above, a massive portion of Earth's remaining fleet surged toward the Sparkai formation, unleashing everything they had left in a desperate attack. Plasma beams lit up the darkness, bright as miniature suns. Explosions reverberated across the space battlefield as Earth's forces engaged in a fierce battle against the invaders. "That should buy us a few minutes," Elena muttered, pushing her ship forward. As the other ships in her strike team followed suit, the chaos in the distance created the perfect cover. The Sparkai were forced to focus on defending against Earth's remaining ships, unaware of the small, determined human force slipping past their defenses. Sarah's voice came through, quick and tense. "We're inside the perimeter. Sensors are going haywire. Can't get a clear lock on anything. We're on our own now." "Stay sharp," Elena ordered. "Lee, we need you to hack into their systems. Find the control node. We can't afford a misstep." Dr. Lee Shwe's fingers flew over her console, her face bathed in the pale blue light of her screen. "I'm in. It's a highly secured system, but I'm bypassing their outer defenses. Just a few more seconds." Every second felt like an eternity. Elena could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her, the knowledge that if they failed, Earth's last hope would be extinguished. The Sparkai were ruthless. One slip up, one wrong move, and the entire planet would fall. The enemy ships around them began to shift, preparing to cut off any escape routes. Terex, the Sparkai commander, wasn't just sitting idly by. Elena knew he would eventually realize something was wrong and move to track them down. "Lee, how much longer?" Elena demanded. "Almost there." Lee's voice was strained, her focus unwavering. "Just a little more time." Suddenly, the comms crackled, cutting through the tension. "Incoming enemy ships!" Sarah shouted. "They've noticed us. We've been spotted." Elena's eyes darted to the holographic map. A dozen Sparkai warships were making a beeline for their position, their engines glowing with lethal intent. They were closing fast. "Brace yourselves," Elena barked, engaging the thrusters to dodge an incoming barrage. Her ship swerved and dipped, narrowly avoiding a pulse of energy that shot past her at incredible speed. The strike team scattered, weaving through the incoming fire as the Sparkai ships unleashed a storm of plasma bolts. "Come on, Lee. We need that signal." Valdez's voice came through, urgent and sharp. With a final click, Dr. Li Shui's voice filled the comms, triumphant but exhausted.
Done.
The virus is in their central command system. It'll take a few moments to fully destabilize their network, but it started.
Good.
Now we get out of here. Elena's hand gripped the controls harder, her ship weaving in and out of fire, narrowly avoiding collisions. Sarah, get us out of here.
Fast.
The Sparkai ships were relentless. They had detected the virus, and now they were hunting down the source of the disturbance with a vengeance. The human ships were fast, but not fast enough to outrun the enemy's pursuit. Then, just as the enemy was closing in for the kill, something unexpected happened. A ripple went through the Sparkai formation. A sudden moment of disarray, ships momentarily slowing or veering off course. "It's working," Lee shouted. "Their systems are destabilizing. We've got a few seconds before they can recalibrate." Elena seized the opportunity. "Sarah, now." Without hesitation, Captain Hayes pushed the throttle to its limit, the ship surging forward like a comet. The team followed, narrowly avoiding incoming fire. The Sparkai fleet was in disarray, but it was clear that this was only a temporary setback. The Sparkai were far from defeated. They would adapt quickly. But in those brief moments of chaos, humanity had a shot. The small strike team broke through the Sparkai blockade, their ships slipping past the alien warships with barely a scratch. The team was battered but alive. Elena exhaled deeply, wiping the sweat from her brow. "We're not out of the woods yet," she said, eyes scanning the horizon. "But we've done something they didn't expect. We've just put a crack in their armor. And that's all we need." The battle was far from over. But for the first time, humanity had shown the Sparkai that they weren't just a race of victims. They were fighters. The silence that followed the chaos of the last few moments felt like a fragile calm before the storm. Elena Monroe sat at the helm of her ship, her hands still shaking from the rush of adrenaline, her heart pounding with the weight of their victory. They had struck a blow, no matter how small, against the seemingly unstoppable Sparkai dominion. But it was just the beginning. The real war was only starting. "Status report," Elena said, her voice steady, though the strain was evident. Her crew, the strike team, was regrouping as they sped toward the rendezvous point, deep within Earth's defense perimeter. The Sparkai fleet was momentarily in disarray, but she knew they'd soon reorganize and come hunting. "We've lost contact with 3 of our strike team," Sarah Hayes replied, her voice grim. "They're still transmitting, but no response." "We're assuming the worst." Elena nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat. "We won't forget them." "We've made it out with the data," Dr. Li Shui said, her voice crackling over the comms. "The virus is destabilizing their command network. But it's only a temporary measure. We've bought humanity a few hours, maybe a day at most. We need to act fast." "Agreed," Elena responded. "The Sparkai will adapt quickly. We need to hit them harder while they're still recovering." The small fleet of human ships coasted through space, the distant fire of the battle still visible behind them. The Earth fleet, battered and nearly broken, was regrouping at a nearby space station. The plan was simple: get the data back to Earth, provide the forces with the intel they needed, and prepare for the counteroffensive. The aliens had shown their hand, and now humanity had the chance to strike back. But Elena knew that the Sparkai weren't the type to play by any rules. They were ruthless, and they had already proven they would stop at nothing to see their conquest through. Back on Earth, the mood was grim. The once proud cities of the world were now littered with signs of devastation. While humanity had fought valiantly, the Sparkai's technological advantage had taken a heavy toll on the planet's surface. Whole regions had been scorched by energy weapons, and large swathes of the population were displaced, living in makeshift shelters as the last remnants of Earth's military tried to hold the line. At the United Nations Aerospace Command Center, Admiral Hassan stood before a massive screen, his face etched with worry. The news was dire. Despite their efforts, Earth's orbital defenses had suffered heavy losses, and the alien forces showed no signs of relenting. The virus Elena's team had deployed had caused significant disruptions in the Sparkai command structure, but it was clear the invaders were already taking steps to contain the damage. "We can't afford to wait for another miracle," Hassan muttered, his voice low but resolute. "We need a more direct approach." A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Admiral, we have news from the field." Hassan turned to see a young officer entering the room, her face pale. "What's the situation?" "The strike team, they've made it back," she reported. "But they're badly damaged. Captain Monroe is requesting a meeting." Elena stepped off her ship and into the makeshift command center, her face smeared with the grime of battle. Her team followed, the remains of their once pristine suits now battered and worn, each member silent and focused. As they made their way to the briefing room, Elena couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this would be the turning point in the war. "We've got a shot, Admiral," Elena said, standing before the gathered leadership. "The virus we deployed hit their command network hard.
But it won't last.
We need to capitalize on this disruption before they patch up their systems." Hassan nodded, his gaze sharp. "We're already preparing a counterattack. Your data gives us the edge we need. But what you're proposing is dangerous." "We don't have time for hesitation," Elena replied firmly. "We've seen their ships, their tactics. We can't defeat them head-on. Not without more time. But if we launch a surgical strike, if we take out their command ship, we might cripple their ability to coordinate. The rest of their fleet will be lost without leadership." "You're asking us to take on their flagship directly?" Hassan asked, his brow furrowing. "The Sparkai fleet is too powerful. One misstep, and we lose everything." "We're already losing everything," Elena shot back, her voice steady. "This is our best chance to strike at the heart of their empire. We do this, or we let them burn our world to ash." A tense silence filled the room. Hassan stared at the map of the alien fleet, his fingers hovering over the console as he weighed the options. He knew Elena was right. The Sparkai were a terrifyingly efficient force, and humanity's chances of victory were rapidly diminishing. But taking the fight directly to the enemy was a risk he wasn't willing to take lightly. Finally, he nodded. "We'll do it. But you'll have to work with our best strategists. This mission won't be like the last one." Elena's gaze hardened. "I'm ready. We don't have time to waste." As the plan began to take shape, Elena and her team spent hours in war rooms, strategizing, coordinating with the remaining Earth forces. The strike against the Sparkai command ship would be dangerous, but with the right intelligence, they might have a fighting chance. The team was rearmed, their ships repaired as best as possible, and new technologies from Earth's most brilliant minds were adapted for the assault. But Elena knew that even with all the planning, nothing could predict how the Sparkai would react. The universe, it seemed, had a way of throwing the most unpredictable challenges at humanity's doorstep. And if Earth was to survive, it would need to do the unthinkable. The countdown had begun. The human forces were assembling, readying their ships for the next phase of the war. And in the heart of space, the Sparkai were preparing for their final strike against Earth. The time for preparation was over. The war was no longer a question of if humanity could survive, but whether it could fight back in a way that would leave the Sparkai trembling. Elena Monroe stood at the edge of the briefing room, her eyes scanning the room full of military personnel and scientists. Everyone was here because they believed in the mission, and that belief was their final lifeline. "All right," Elena said, breaking the silence. "We're moving out in 20 minutes. This will be the most dangerous strike of our lives, but it's our only shot. We've already seen the Sparkai adapt quickly to setbacks. We have to hit them hard, and we have to hit them fast. No hesitation." She turned to Captain Sarah Hayes, who was standing beside the tactical display. "Sarah, you'll be leading the assault. You've got the best flying instincts we've got. You get in, you hit them where it hurts, and you get out. We won't have long once we breach their defenses." Sarah gave her a firm nod. "Understood. I'll make sure we leave them with more than they can handle." Elena's gaze moved across the room, settling on Dr. Li Shui, who was hunched over a holographic terminal, her fingers flying over the controls. "Li, how are the new tech modifications coming along? We're relying on you to ensure our ships can get past their shields." We've adapted Earth's latest stealth technology to the mission, but it won't be enough to fool them for long, Lee replied without looking up. I've integrated a quantum pulse disruptor into our fleet. It should temporarily disable their shields, but we only have a short window before they recover. We need precision. Then we make sure we strike hard enough that they won't have time to recover, Elena said. She turned to Sergeant Marcus Valdez, who had been standing in the corner, sharpening his blade. Marcus, you'll be on the ground. We need boots on the ground inside their command ship to plant the virus's final code. If Lee's virus disrupts their systems, we'll need you to create chaos. Keep their forces off balance while the virus finishes its work. Valdez cracked his knuckles, his eyes gleaming with purpose. I'll make sure they know we're here. And I'll make them regret every step they've taken. The tension in the room was palpable. Every person here understood the stakes. The fate of Earth rested on their shoulders, and if they failed, there would be no second chance. Hours later, Elena and her team sat in their ships, the engines roaring to life. The strike force was composed of a small, elite team of ships, maneuvering through the darkness of space toward the heart of the Sci-Fi fleet. The planet's atmosphere was still burning with the remnants of the recent battles, and the sight of the stars in the distance now felt like a distant hope. Sarah's voice crackled over the comms. We're approaching the perimeter. Hold tight, everyone. Elena gripped the controls of her own ship. The mission had been set into motion. The Sci-Fi flagship, a towering, menacing structure that seemed to swallow the light, loomed ahead. The heart of the invaders' power. If they could bring it down, even for just a moment, it would be a significant blow. Get ready, Elena said. Lee, Sarah, Marcus. This is it. The ships dove deeper into the heart of enemy space, undetected for now. Their cloaking systems masked their presence, keeping them invisible from the Sci-Fi sensors. It would be a few more minutes before they would have to make their move. Minutes they couldn't afford to waste. As they approached the outer edge of the flagship's defensive perimeter, Elena's mind raced. The Sci-Fi ships, massive and menacing, surrounded them. But something felt off. There was no immediate sign of detection, no immediate action. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the Sci-Fi commander had anticipated this move. Something's wrong, Elena muttered, scanning the space ahead. Prepare for unexpected resistance. They know we're coming. Valdez's voice came through, calm but intense. Just tell me when to shoot, and I'll make it count. Suddenly, a blinding pulse of light erupted from the heart of the Sci-Fi fleet, and an alarm blared across their ships. Ambush! Sarah's voice rang through the comms. They've been waiting for us. Before Elena could react, a barrage of plasma fire exploded in their path, tearing through space like jagged bolts of lightning. The cloaking technology was no match for the overwhelming firepower of the Sci-Fi, and their ships were immediately detected. We've been compromised. Dr. Li Shui shouted. Shields are down. They've hacked into our systems. Get ready to take evasive action. Sarah swung the ship hard to the left, narrowly avoiding a massive blast that skimmed past them. I'm not going down without a fight. The rest of the strike team followed suit, weaving and dodging through incoming fire, their ships dancing around the enemy onslaught. The Sci-Fi had anticipated their every move, and now they were fighting not just for their mission but for their lives. Focus on the flagship, Elena barked, her heart racing. Sarah, Marcus, Lee, get to the heart of that ship. We'll deal with the rest later. Their mission had been compromised, but there was no turning back now. They had come too far to fail. The Sci-Fi were more dangerous than they had ever realized, but humanity's fight was far from over. Elena knew, deep in her gut, that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. And they were ready to face it head-on. The strike team pressed forward, cutting through the heart of the Sci-Fi formation. The odds were stacked against them, but there was no room for doubt. They had come this far, and now the final battle would determine if humanity had the strength to fight back or if they would fall under the shadow of a galactic empire. The Sci-Fi flagship loomed before them, a massive fortress of black metal and unyielding power. Its surface was covered with rippling energy shields, impenetrable to all but the most sophisticated weaponry. But Elena Monroe's strike team had come prepared. The mission was clear: infiltrate the heart of the flagship, plant the final piece of a virus, and cripple the Sparkhi's command structure for good. But now, with the fleet closing in and the enemy already on high alert, survival was becoming a fragile hope. "Hold on tight." Sarah Hayes' voice came through the comms, sharp and urgent, as she expertly maneuvered her ship through the hellfire of enemy plasma. "The flagship's shields are tougher than we thought, but we've got a gap. Just a small one." The pulse disruptor Li Shui had installed was working, but only just. The energy shields of the Sparkhi were flickering, temporarily deactivated, but they were regaining strength with every passing second. Their time was running out. "We can't afford to waste any more time," Elena growled. "Sarah, push us forward. Valdez, prepare for ground assault. We're not pulling back now." The ground beneath Elena's feet seemed to tremble as her ship hurtled toward the Sparkhi flagship's outer hull. She braced herself, clutching the sides of her seat as the ship's engines screamed with intensity. The whole crew was silent, each of them fully aware of the stakes, each of them knowing that the next move could be their last. As Sarah brought the ship closer to the flagship, Elena's eyes fixed on the massive docking bay opening ahead. It was a narrow gap, barely wide enough to fit their ship. The Sparkhi warships swarmed around them, each one an imposing wall of firepower, but the team's advanced stealth tech was working, just enough to keep them undetected as they approached the heart of the enemy vessel. "We're in," Sarah shouted, her voice thick with tension. "Brace for impact." The ship jolted as it made contact with the docking bay's outer structure, the magnetic clamps engaging and securing them in place. The strike team wasted no time. The hatch opened with a hiss, and Elena, Sarah, Lee, and Marcus, all clad in advanced combat armor, rushed out onto the metal floor of the flagship. "Let's move," Elena ordered, her voice cold with determination. They advanced through the darkened corridors, the air thick with the hum of alien machinery. The walls of the flagship were lined with strange symbols, etched into the very surface of the metal. The Sparkhi's technology was alien and incomprehensible, but the humans were focused on one thing: the virus. It was their key to ending this war. "Marcus, take point," Elena commanded. "Keep your eyes open. They'll know we're here soon enough." Valdez nodded, his rifle at the ready. The sound of his boots echoed in the corridors as he moved ahead, scanning every corner. The ship was eerily quiet, save for the occasional hum of the Sparkhi technology. The mission was supposed to be a strike in the dark, but with each step, Elena could feel the weight of the unknown pressing on her. They were walking into the lion's den. "Right this way," Li Shui said, her voice barely a whisper. She led them through a series of twisting hallways until they reached a large, heavily guarded chamber. The walls were lined with alien consoles, and in the center, there was a massive glowing interface, the command hub of the Sparkhi flagship. Elena took a deep breath. "Lee, it's all on you now. You get the virus in, and we hold off any resistance." Lee's fingers were already moving across the alien interface, hacking into the system with precision. The room around them began to hum with energy, as though the very walls themselves were alive. The Sparkhi were beginning to realize their vulnerability. "I'm in," Lee said, her voice tense. "It's just a matter of time before they notice the breach. We've got 5 minutes at most. Then we make sure it's enough," Elena said. She turned to Valdez and Sarah. "Take positions. We're going to hold this room." The battle began almost immediately. The door to the chamber slammed open, and a squad of Sparkhi warriors stormed in, their black armor glistening like shadows in the dim light. They were unlike anything humanity had encountered, taller, stronger, and far more agile than any human soldier. The air filled with the sound of heavy footsteps, followed by the crackling of energy weapons charging. "Get ready," Sarah barked, pulling her weapon into position. Elena's hand went to her sidearm, and she squeezed off the first shot. The bullet tore through one of the Sparkhi warriors, but it barely slowed him down. The enemy was relentless. "Focus fire," Valdez shouted, his voice a growl of determination. The humans fired as one, their weapons cutting through the Svarkai forces with precision. But the enemy wasn't about to back down. The Svarkai surged forward, using their superior strength and speed to close the gap. A Svarkai warrior lunged at Marcus, his claws outstretched, but Marcus was faster. He sidestepped, slashing his blade across the warrior's side, sending it crashing to the ground.
Lee.
Elena shouted over the chaos. How much longer? Lee's face was taut with concentration. I'm almost there. Just a few more seconds. The sound of enemy reinforcements echoed down the hallway. The humans were running out of time, and the Svarkai were closing in on them. Sweat poured down Elena's face as she surveyed the battlefield, trying to keep the advancing warriors at bay. They had to hold on.
Now,
Lee shouted. With a final keystroke, the virus was fully integrated into the Svarkai system. A ripple of energy shot through the flagship's walls as the virus began to spread. The Svarkai warriors faltered, their communication systems flickering and failing. The entire flagship seemed to shudder under the weight of the disruption.
We've got it.
Elena yelled, her pulse racing.
Move. Now.
The strike team surged forward, running back toward their ship, fighting their way through the Svarkai defenders who were now scrambling to regain control of their systems. The virus was working, but they couldn't stay any longer. As they made their way back to the docking bay, Elena could see the panic setting in among the Svarkai. Their fleet was in chaos, their flagship on the brink of collapse. But their final, desperate counterattack had begun. Get to the ship, Elena screamed as they burst through the door. The corridors of the Svarkai flagship were now a battleground. Elena Monroe's heart hammered in her chest as her team sprinted back toward the docking bay, the ship's internal alarms blaring in their ears. The virus they'd implanted was already wreaking havoc, disabling the flagship's critical systems, but it wasn't enough to guarantee their escape. They were still deep inside enemy territory, surrounded by the Svarkai's elite warriors. Move, 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 Elena shouted, her voice steady despite the rising chaos. Every step they took was one closer to their chance at survival, but the Svarkai were not the type to let enemies flee unscathed. Behind them, the sound of pounding footsteps echoed through the metal halls, Svarkai soldiers closing in. Elena glanced over her shoulder, watching as Sarah Hayes fired a few well-placed shots, keeping the enemy at bay for a moment longer. How far? Sarah called out, her voice breathless. Just 100 meters to the ship, Elena replied, her eyes scanning the corridor ahead. Keep it together. We can't stop now. But the Svarkai were relentless. The flashing red lights of the alarms were accompanied by the harsh hiss of doors opening, more soldiers flooding in from every direction. We need to make a stand, Marcus Valdez said, his voice rough. He gripped his rifle tighter, his body braced for the incoming wave. They're coming from every angle. If we don't make a move, we won't make it. We don't have time. Elena snapped. We get to the ship, now. Li Shui, her fingers tight on the controls of her energy weapon, fired in rapid succession. The Svarkai warriors staggered, but pushed forward with grim determination. The ship, her only hope, was still within reach, but the clock was ticking. The virus was slowing down their systems, but it wouldn't stop the war machine for long. On your six, Elena. Sarah's shout cut through the air as the team moved in unison, taking down Svarkai soldiers with calculated precision. The distant sound of their ship's engine was the only thing keeping hope alive. Elena didn't dare look back. There was no time to consider what would happen if they failed. They had done the impossible. They had crippled the Svarkai flagship, temporarily neutralized their command structure, and bought humanity a window of opportunity. But the battle was far from over. They burst into the docking bay just as a massive explosion rocked the ship. The sound was deafening, and Elena nearly lost her balance from the shockwave. They were not alone. The Svarkai had realized what they were doing, and they weren't going to let them escape. We're not done yet, Marcus growled, turning to face the growing wave of enemy soldiers that rushed into the bay, guns blazing. Get in the ship, Elena commanded, her voice steely with resolve. We'll hold them off as long as we can. Sarah was already at the helm, priming the ship for takeoff, while Marcus and Elena set up a defensive position. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning metal as Sparkai warriors poured into the room. "I'll cover you," Marcus shouted, his rifle a constant rhythm of fire. "Get moving," Elena yelled back, her hand on her pulse rifle, eyes locked on the advancing Sparkai. The ship's engines roared to life as Sarah guided it toward the open bay doors, but the enemies were closing in. Elena's heart raced with urgency. They couldn't afford to lose even a single member now. The Sparkai were relentless, their advanced weapons clashing against the human resistance. Elena fought with everything she had, but she knew they couldn't hold out forever. The team needed to escape, or all their efforts would be in vain. "Status," Elena shouted into her comm. "We're almost clear," Sarah responded. "The bay doors are open, but we need to get out now. There's too much incoming fire." With a final, desperate push, Marcus and Elena made their way toward the ship, the Sparkai closing in. The team had done the impossible. They had infiltrated the flagship, planted the virus, and survived. But as the ship's engines roared louder, the last few steps toward freedom felt like an eternity. "Get in," Sarah shouted as the ship hovered just above the floor. One by one, the team dashed for the ship's entrance, barely making it inside before the doors slammed shut behind them. Elena quickly took her seat, her pulse racing, her mind clouded with a mix of adrenaline and relief. "We're out," Sarah said, her voice shaking with the aftereffects of the chaos. But we're not out of danger yet. The Sparkai flagship loomed large behind them, and as they broke through the atmosphere, the distant explosion of the massive ship falling into chaos marked their departure. The ship, the heart of the Sparkai invasion, was now a wreck. But Elena knew that the war wasn't over. The virus had worked, but it was only a temporary solution. The Sparkai would recover, and Earth would need to prepare for the next phase of the conflict. The journey ahead would be brutal. The Sparkai would retaliate. But Elena and her team had proven that humanity had the will to fight, no matter how impossible the odds. "We've won a battle, not the war," Elena said, her voice calm despite the adrenaline still pulsing through her veins. "Now, it's time to take this fight to them. For Earth. For the future." As the crew settled into their seats, the hum of the engines drowned out everything else. They had done the unthinkable, and the Sparkai now knew humanity would not go quietly into the night.